guys, this is deliciousVB with another tutorial, and this tutorial will be the first tutorial in my series called the Beginner Series, and it'll introduce all beginners to Visual Basic. It will introduce the Visual Studio interface, and I believe that this is crucial for people to learn Visual Basic, because it is hard to get every single feature of the interface on your own. So I'm making a beginner series, and it'll go through all the basics of Visual Basic. Now, this tutorial, I think, will help not only with Visual Basic, but will help with future programming languages if you choose to use Visual Studio. There are other ways you can code Visual Basic, C# or C++, however. But I recommend you use Visual Studio. Because you can use that in the future, I'm going to introduce you to the interface. And like I said before, since the Visual Studio interface is the same in C# and C++, it may be a little easier. I found it a lot easier when I started learning different languages with Visual Studio. Now, let's start by going over the few buttons. Now, hold on. Let me open the start page. You don't have to do this. It should already be there. Now, when you start it up, you should see something like, hold on. You should see something like this. Okay. Similar to this. It may not be exactly the same, but you should see something similar to this. Now, I want you to go over to View and click on Other Windows. And first click on Toolbox. Toolbox is where you can get all the controls. Controls is a fancy word for components of the window. So for example, one component of or control of this window right here is this little strip of this little menu right here. That's one component. This button is another component. So that's in Visual Basic and actually Visual Studio, you call those controls. Now, right now there are no controls because you're not editing any window, which once again in Visual Studio you'd call it a form. You're not editing any form, so there's nothing to drag onto the form. Now, to create a new form, simply click New Project. This will open up a window that allows you to select the type of project and what you want to name your project. I'm going to do a Windows Forms application. A Windows Forms application is just a window. That's basically all it is, a window with coding and all that stuff. So for example, you can use Notepad as an example. That's a Windows Forms application. Visual Basic is a Windows Forms application. Okay, so you can get that idea. Don't mess with the other ones for now. They're a little more complicated. And this is the basic. Now, once again, application is kind of a fancy word for software or program. So application means your whole program that you've coded. Now, you can name the project whatever you want. I'm just, to make it a little neat, I'm going to say Beginner Tutorial 1 and hit OK or Enter. And it should load after a little bit. So you need to wait for it to load. Now, on the right, I've loaded my properties window. Now, if this has not loaded for you, simply go to View, Other Windows, and Properties window. Now, properties is simply changing their attributes of specific controls. So let's say you put down a label. A label is basically just text. That's what a label is. Now, you see I've dragged it on my form. Now if I click this debug button, start debugging, which is F5, debugging is basically testing your program. So this runs your program. Now if I click debug, my window will open, and you see I have a label or I have text because I dragged it onto the form and it has text on it. So now you can drag this wherever you want. The font you can change. You can click this button right here to browse fonts. So I'm just gonna change it to this, whatever. I don't even know this font, but I'm just gonna change it. And now text. Oh, I don't want it to say label 1. What the heck? So all you need to do is click on this text property, and if you see this screen, if you see this, simply click on this button, A to Z. Now, I like the A to Z a lot better. So find text, which is T, okay, and you can change the text to whatever you want. So let's say my first control, and you hit enter, and voila. The text changes to my first control. So these are basically attributes of this label, of this text. Now, there will be many that you probably do not understand at this point, since this is a beginner's video. Now, yes, the form also indeed has attributes. So if you click on the form, not on the label, but on the form, on the window, you'll go over to the right. The properties list will load, and there are different properties. Now, do not mess with the font. That is a little bit complicated. But if you want to, you can change the text. So let's say my first window. And if you don't want the user to be able to minimize this form, simply go to minimize box, and it says true. You want to change that to false, so click on this button and click false, or you can just double click. Don't want them to be able to maximize it, double click on that. Now, not wanting them to be able to close it is a little different and a little complicated, so don't try to find that right now. It's not there. Next, you can explore some of these, like form border style is a little bit complicated, but let's say you say none. Then you see no window at all. You just see a blank thing. Now it still runs, except it doesn't have a window. Fixed single, you see the window, but it's fixed, meaning that the user cannot resize it. You can resize it, but the user cannot. Now, that's pretty much the end for the properties window. Now, the next window I'm going to explain is the Solution Explorer. With the Solution Explorer, you can basically just explore every file in your program, which your program is basically your solution. So now I don't recommend you click on anything, just to save confusion. Now, so that's that. It's basically just browsing your whole program, finding files, windows, forms, code, projects. Okay, now, the last window, actually not the last window, but actually, yes, the last window I'm going to be talking about is the error list. Now, click on it, and if it's not at the bottom, just simply drag it and drag it down here. Now you can resize it to whatever you want. Now, I have this data sources window. Just ignore it, please. It's very complicated, like very complicated. So, error list basically describes every error. Now, I'm not going to purposely show you an error, because once I load the code window, it will be very confusing. Very confusing. So, for now, I'm not going to test an error, but basically, it'll say the description, which sometimes, if you don't have good vocabulary, you won't be able to understand the error. Now, if you just research the error, so right click and click copy the error. So right now there's no error to copy, so it's disabled. But if there's an error, just click copy and then paste it in Google search and just search the error, and it should come up. It should come up. Now if it try to browse forums, I definitely recommend you browse forums. Now if or MSD. Now if you can't come up with a solution, then you can actually ask a question instead of research questions. So that's all the windows. Now, file menu, new project, open project. Okay, these are all pretty explanatory. Now, project is basically a solution, which is basically a program. Okay, but anyway, open file you don't need to worry about. Add you don't need to worry about. Close project. Now you can click close project. Now it'll ask you if you want to save it. Oh wait, one thing before I do that. Save all saves every single change you made after you last saved it. This save just saves every single change you made on this window or this form or this coding page, whatever. It saves everything on this window only since your last save. So those are those two buttons, cut, copy, and paste. You should know those. Undo, redo. These are complicated. These all have to do with debugging pretty much. So ignore these for now. These are shortcuts for some windows, but just ignore Extension Manager, Error List, and Immediate. Now, edit. These all you should be able to. These all you should know. Find, replace. View. I already kind of showed you. Code. Views the code. Once again, I'm not going to get into that. Full screen if you want to. You don't have to. I don't usually use it. Project. Okay, these are add forms, add items. Those all be explained in a few tutorials to come. Start debugging, all that stuff. Data, don't worry about tools. There are settings, customize options. Don't mess with it, please. Because these could be permanent and it can mess it up, and it's horrible when that happens. Window, you can float, dock is tab, document, auto hide, but just if you mess with something, make sure you know what you messed with and know how to change it back. Now, this is help. Once again, MSD and forums, a good place to ask questions, review questions. There's an about. Now, register product is what I wanted to get to. I already registered it. Now, if you haven't registered it, meaning you just downloaded, there should be a register button. Register online button. Just click that button and go in the web browser, which I don't know where it is, and all you need to do is fill out the form, which there's a lot of stuff there, but you'll get the code, and you'll just insert it in the text box, which you'll see. Whoops, I didn't mean to click that button. And then click close, and you've registered it. Now, if you never register it, it'll expire, but you should be able to register it. Now, thanks for watching this tutorial. I sat there. I hope you enjoyed it. And make sure to watch the next tutorial in the series for beginners. And the next tutorial will cover common controls that are commonly used and what exactly they do, and basically creating your first form. We will not get into coding until the tutorial after that, which we will start learning about event handlers and simple lines of code. So that's it for this tutorial. Make sure to rate, comment, subscribe to get every video when it comes out. Check out my website, deliciousVB.net.